Hi, everyone. For this year's Synapse workshop, we are excited to collaborate with Hein, an educator, musician, producer, and scholar who teaches music education, technology, theory, and songwriting at New York University and the New School. So together, we are super hyped to introduce you to this summer's Songwriters Lab workshop, which is an 8 weeks online summer workshop to help you flourish as a songwriter. Hi, Ethan.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us, and we are super hyped for this collaboration. Ethan and Will Kuhn co-wrote a book in 2021 called Electric Music School. Da, da, da. I actually
Oh, you
bought it.
have it.
I have
Awesome.
it. Nate also has it. This book actually heavily influenced how Synthesis teaches music production classes to our charter school students. Ethan also has his own unique takes on teaching songwriting, and we cannot wait to extend this opportunity of learning from Ethan to you. So, Ethan, can you tell us a little bit about the Songwriters Lab workshop and what's your unique approach to teaching songwriting?
So my feeling about songwriting is you just got to do it. Just got to plunge in there. So we will be doing this series of projects using different like classic song forms. So like the 32 bar AABA, like from jazz standards, the 12 bar blues, things like that. These, just these containers that are like well-worn tools, but for a reason, right? But the subject matter, the style is entirely up to the people in the room.
Right.
And what I found from doing this is that sometimes people who have never tried to make music in any capacity at all can actually have like a pretty big advantage when it comes to songwriting. You don't need to be able to play instruments or produce. That is helpful, but you don't actually need it. Like it's if you want to just use loops from GarageBand or Splice.com, karaoke tracks from YouTube,
Oh, that's
type
a thing.
beats. Yeah, for sure, right? Like these are all like really valid ways to approach it, and you everybody has heard a lot of songs, right?
Right.
So yeah, most people are walking around with like plenty of raw material in here. And so like if people can kind of overcome their anxiety and their stage fright, it tends to be just kind of like turning on a faucet. A lot of like songwriters who I've taught in the past have said like they've had stuff come to them in dreams. And there are a couple of really famous songs like, Yesterday, right, by the Beatles. Paul McCartney just woke up one morning and there it was. The difference between Paul McCartney and most people is he had a tape recorder in every room in his house
Oh, that's smart.
so that, he was ready to rock if, something like that happened to him. But now we all have our phones, right? Just
Hmm.
record a voice memo and then go back to sleep.
If you also think about the Avalanche, like they make their albums through just like recording random LPs and random sound, it's also a really good way to go. I guess there are like endless possibilities.
Yeah, there is, right. There are as many songwriting methods as there are people.
That's true.
I mean, I will definitely offer some, some ice breaking things, to get folks past being self conscious or feeling stuck. But, all little kids make up songs too,
Right. Yeah, for sure.
right? Like you can't stop them. um, and so I feel like, my job is more just to kind of reactivate this thing that is already in people. It's just maybe kind of been lying dormant, for a bunch of years.
Right.
But yeah, that the ability is in there.
For sure, for sure. So, we understand that this curriculum has been very well loved and taught many, many times in colleges in person, right? But like this time you're doing it online, because we are an online music school. So, like, what's your take on teaching songwriting online? And is it more challenging or just fun in a very different way?
So the very first time I ever taught a songwriting class was online during the pandemic.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, we all got a lot of practice doing things online during the
For sure.
in 2020. Yeah. No, but online, it has its pros and cons. Like it's nice to be in a room together, but I will say one huge advantage of online is the chat window. Having that side channel, because first of all, then you can be responding while people are listening to the song without interrupting.
That's true.
And also, I've noticed there are some people who will not speak up in a room full of people, but will happily in the in the chat. And so, yeah, like it because you don't want to get into this thing of like the same three people do all of the talking every session.
Oh yeah, we know we all have those students.
Yeah, so I feel like the chat window activates a whole other group of people.
And I guess like what kind of challenges do you think are unique to emerging songwriters and producers who say are very new to the field, and how does Songwriters Lab help them navigate through these challenges?
By far the hardest thing is just like sharing stuff with people, right? It's like jumping off a cliff, right? It's so scary. And like, I tell my like undergrad songwriting students all the time, like just by like walking into the room, y'all are braver, A, than most people, B, much braver than I was, as like a 19-year old. Like I wouldn't have gotten anywhere near a songwriting class, not because I wasn't interested, but because I was too chicken, right? No, most people are afraid of being judged. And
For sure.
and so I think, if you just have that experience of like, you present your thing and it's terrifying and awful, but then the earth doesn't open and swallow you whole. Once you sort of do it and you're like, oh, wait, that wasn't nearly as terrible as I feared it would be. And then you do it a second time and it's actually kind of fun. Then you do it a third time and you're like, oh, I got this, and then it just becomes like no big deal at all. Right. That I feel like, I have plenty of like technical music things to offer people and, literary things and references to other songs and da da da. But the main thing is just, yeah, just the psychological handholding as we like jump off the cliff together.
Then it became a life-changing experience.
It is a life-changing experience, no joke. Like, and I say this to my students too, that like very few people who go through a class like this are going to end up, doing this professionally. But like, I don't think there's like a better way to just kind of build yourself as a person, right? As just like
Right.
an emotional being. And then also people do sometimes go and win Grammys and that's great. But like, just as like a way of being in the world, like, it's been a real gift for me for sure.
It's also like being creative is a way of being.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, especially if you're a teacher or you have kids, like you find yourself making up songs all the time just for like, all right, I got to get these kids out of bed five
Right.
days a week. And like, it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. Every day I make up a different song for them to wake up to. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it just makes your day-to-day life a lot more enjoyable.
I like how you intuitively ended on a tonic.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Yeah, I know. So would you say that this class is beginner friendly? Say like we have this person who has music stuck in their head, but just like does not know how to get it out and never tried to get it out before. Do you think they're suitable for this class?
Yeah, I mean, technology has made it so that the playing field is pretty level. That like
Hmm.
because there are all these awesome loop libraries, right? And
Yeah.
because there are all these, like the DAWs and like all these type beats and karaoke tracks and things, the technical barrier is pretty much non-existent. Also, most people are better singers than they think they are. Like, not everybody is going to, just sound like Ariana Grande immediately, but like, that's also not really what's necessary.
That's true.
Like, we all love, Leonard Cohen, David Byrne, like these, PJ Harvey, like these kind of voices who sound like regular people. We don't necessarily think to extend that same grace to ourselves, but we could, right? But yeah, I mean, like, even if you're a complete beginner, like I said, you've probably memorized how many songs in your life, right? You have a pretty substantial library,
That's true.
right? And I think one reason why people should try songwriting is to like demystify the process and to help people understand that there's not a lot of originality out there. Most of what creativity is just breaking apart existing things and recombining the pieces in new ways. And you already have all the pieces that are in there. So there's this great interview with Paul McCartney and Stephen Colbert, and Colbert asked him, like, how did this come to be? How did you come to be? And Paul's like, well, when I was a kid, we always just like sat around the piano and sang these old songs, Chicago, Chicago, that kind of stuff. And then his dad was the pianist, but then his dad got arthritis. And so Paul became the pianist. And so he ended up, just kind of memorizing 500 corny old show tunes.
That's how it works.
Right. And then he's like, when it came to Ray, it's just like all these pieces were just kind of in there already. Now, most people aren't quite as, driven as Paul McCartney. But yeah, I do think that like not everybody is going to be as good at it as him or as effortless as him. But this process that he went through, I really think anybody could do it if they were motivated.
So let's talk about you. So I've been doing a little bit of digging, and I noticed that your background is in both music technology and music education. Then you went for a PhD in music education after earning a master's in music tech. So what really urged you to make this switch?
Yeah, nothing about my academic career has been remotely planned in advance. I was always like a rock, pop, R&B, hip hop guy. And when I was younger, academia was not interested in any of that stuff. But like music tech was kind of a backdoor for pop musicians. So like, I went through the NYU Music Technology Master's Program, and that was the one music program where you didn't have to audition. You could
Oh,
just send them your
really?
SoundCloud. You had to have a portfolio of stuff that you'd made, but you didn't have to go in there and like do, like a Bach, invention or whatever the normal music students had to do. And so, yeah, it was like a way in for all these, producers and guitarists and singer songwriters and people like that. I got really interested in like developing software tools for people to learn with, because like a lot of my own music learning was just like sitting in front of like Ableton or Logic and figuring stuff out. And I think there are a lot of people for whom, kind of their most important music teacher is whoever it was who designed FL Studio.
Yeah, for sure.
And to their credit, like people at these companies are kind of aware of that responsibility now. So I've done a little work with Ableton, like helping them kind of create this educational stuff more intentionally because they know
Hmm.
that that's what they're doing anyway. And so I thought, yeah, like, people who are kind of at that intermediate to advanced level are very well served by all these tools, but the beginners, it's tough. And so my master's thesis project was this thing called the Groove Pizza, which is like a beginner friendly drum machine.
I love it. I
Um,
use it to teach. I
you
actually
do?
use it to teach drum beats.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah. And we developed a couple other tools with this research group called the Music Experience Design Lab, and I use them too in teaching. That like the computer is like pretty wonderful for all the different ways you can like visualize stuff and both see and hear it at the same time,
Hmm.
right? And the way you can use color and shapes, to in addition to standard notation to represent all these things. Yeah, it's a big help.
And one thing really amazing about Groove Pizza is that after you finish making the beat, if you really like it, you can just like get it into Soundtrap or get it into No Flight. Then here you
Yeah,
go,
or
it's there.
export it as MIDI, export it as a
Yeah,
wave. Yeah. Yeah. And so the fact that like a beginner can be like making a beat that actually sounds like something is pretty exciting. Because, if you're playing an instrument, it's a lot of years before you get to the point where you're making something that sounds good.
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, these producers, now getting good at making beats takes a long time, but just getting something playing back at you that sounds like something takes 10 seconds. And so, the stuff that I was doing is not very advanced technologically, but, it quickly became apparent that like, this is kind of a new thing for the education field, that all this technology is like pretty mature at this point, but it's just been slower to kind of get adopted into people's teaching. And so that's kind of where the excitement and the challenge is.
So like you said earlier that you're always a rock, hip hop, pop guy. So like I guess what's your music experience outside of academia? Like I know you play fret instrument. Do you do a lot of like shows and stuff?
Well, since I had kids, my performance schedule is kind of got, but they'll go to college eventually and then I'll get back. No, I mean, I used to, just like played in a bunch of like rock bands, country bands, jazz, R&B, played in a bunch of musicals. Yeah. And like, as I got older, and also had kids, just did a lot more producing than performing just for practical reasons. But also like, production is its own kind of, there's a lot of satisfaction in like having some thought, putting it together, and then having it on Bandcamp an hour later.
For sure. Yeah.
That is awesome, right?
That is. That is.
Yeah, being able to like just, bang out tracks while I'm like on the bus is like
I've
amazing.
I've never done that before. I think it's a New York City thing because you can't really bang out the track while driving the car.
No, no, I do not recommend that people do that. No, but if you're on like I'm talking about like, like a 2 hour bus ride or something like, yeah, a really good way to pass the time.
I need to try that next time.
It takes a lot of the pain out of the 2 hour bus ride.
So, as I said, you live in New York City, and
I
I
do.
heard from a mysterious person that you've been to many, many shows. So what's your favorite show that you've ever been to?
Okay, I'm going to tell a story that makes me seem much cooler than I am.
Okay.
When I was in high school, I was very not cool, but I had a couple of cool friends. And one of them insisted in 1991 that we go to see PJ Harvey at the Continental Club in the East Village. And this was when she was kind of on her way up and the cool people knew about her, but she was still playing in like these tiny rock clubs, right? And so we went and there were a bunch of opening acts. And the first one was a band called Gallon Drunk, who I will never forget because they were the worst band I've ever heard in my life. And they were unbelievably loud. The second band was Radiohead.
Oh,
And nobody had ever heard of them, right? This is 1991. And I remember vividly, there's like 20 of us in the club, and like Tom York is just playing as if he's playing to a stadium full of people. Sweat is just pouring off of him. He really brought it. And I'm like, wow, who are these guys? Oh my God, they're unbelievable. And then some other band who I've forgotten. And then PJ Harvey, who was great.
wow.
But that is not representative of my high school experience. I was not that cool. That was an outlier.
All right. I think that's a wrap. So thank you very much, Ethan. Songwriters Lab it will run from June 14th to August 9th in 2025, and we only have the capacity for 30 students. So registration is now open on a first time, first served basis. So if you're interested in joining Ethan and the Songwriters Lab, please click the link in the description for more information. And we look forward to working with you in the summer.